Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's Video Podcast. Today is Sunday, April the 4th, 2021. It's Easter Sunday. And for many people in Israel and parts of the Vatican and other religious areas where they have been putting people into churches for the day, a lot of the religious leaders feel like there's been a bit of a miracle because they've been able to get the people back in their congregations and maybe pass the basket around, collect a little money, and get things back to what they think is normal. Whether that's happening or not, I'm not sure, but we're looking at it anyway. I want to just sort of look at the front page of the paper today. And, well, to summarize the front page of today's Sunday Times, a 10-year-old girl is shot to death in Myanmar, and she's become an unintended victim of the military coup. The trial for the police killing of George Floyd seems to have left scars on anybody who witnessed the killing. And was there either filming it or watching it happen. All of these people were there. They watched a guy get murdered by the police, and they felt helpless to do anything. If we look over there on the far left side of the paper, the rising variants in peril of return to normal life. And this story is sort of contradicted inside the paper about page 8, 9, or 10, where everybody's trying to return to normal life, but these COVID variants, the variants are sticking around quite a bit, and some of these, well, we have the South African variant, we've got the variant from England, we have a California variant, a New York variant, there's variants all over the place. Some of the spikes is starting to change on a couple of them, and now they're affecting more younger people. So as we push to get everybody vaccinated, the closer we get to getting people vaccinated, the more the virus is going to mutate. And as this is going on, more and more people want to get out right now. So if everybody would just sort of stay in for like another month, we could probably beat this bloody thing. But that doesn't seem to be the case, especially in a few states that have lifted mask mandates, and people are now, you can have as many people as you want go into some stadiums. Also, an interesting fact is that there are 30 countries on the planet where not one vaccine has been administered to anybody in the country. So there's 30 countries that not one vaccine has been administered. We're in a worldwide pandemic. If we reach herd immunity here in America, and there isn't any similar event happening in Europe or in Asia or in South America or in Africa, once the travel gets going, these variants are going to get going again one more time. So it seems to me we're at a really tipping point of whether we could have this thing go in our favor and we could eradicate this, or we could just throw caution to the wind. And it seems like there's a lot of people want to throw caution to the wind. There was even in this town where I live, which is pretty anti-Trump to say the least, there was a whole contingency of people protesting the wearing of the masks and the fact that the vaccine is a scam, and this whole BS about how it's all a big scam, and the thought police are running our lives, and I don't know what these people are made of, or who they know, or who they talk to, but they don't seem to know anything that's going on in the hospitals, or with people that have been sick, or that people that have gotten COVID, who have long COVID now, or people that have died from it. And if you start to talk to enough people, you'll find that a large numbers of people that you talk to have had quite a few experiences of people getting sick or even dying from the disease. So to have people with signs of protesting the vaccine as a scam and a mind control that's happening from the government is just, I mean, how paranoid can anybody get? This is just off the wall. The other interesting sort of non-headline had to do with Trump. Trump steering supporters into unwitting donations. The Donald, who's been out of the news for a few weeks now, he keeps popping his head up. He makes a call into Fox News, or they'll interview one of the kids on Fox News. Well, apparently, back in the beginning of the summer when the campaign was getting going, there's this little deal. Well, I think I have a picture of it here. Maybe I can get the box up. And when you go to make a donation, there it is. When you go to make a donation, or say you had a subscription to a magazine you were going to get, they have a pre-check box. So say you agree to pay them $5 a month. There might be a box that says that you agree to pay them $5 a month for every month. Or there was a checkoff box that says you're going to repeat your payment next month, or you're going to repeat your payment next week. The point is, it's the boxes there, it's already checked off. Now, there's been about 2% of donations made to both campaigns over time people have been tricked by this, and money has been refunded to people, and it's usually about 2%. And it usually comes up, as far as the Democratic Party was concerned, it comes up on pages that were really clear about the fact that you were going to be, that you were checking a box to make extra payments. Well, the Trump people saw a golden opportunity here to get a whole bunch of money out of people. So they started adding these other boxes. So they added a second box, which they checked off, telling you were a special donor, and because you were a special donor, they were going to take money out of your account every week or every month. So, for instance, one individual signed up and agreed to give $500 to the Trump campaign. Well, he wound up with almost $3,000 getting taken out of his account. Quite a few similar stories like this, where people agreed for one payment, they didn't read the fine print, and suddenly they had payments coming out of their checks, out of their banking accounts every week, every month. It was just, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. How crazy can things get? So those are just the regular stories that were on page 1 that I saw. Interestingly, let's get rid of that guy up there. Let's get rid of the boxes. And there were 3 stories on the international page which were pretty interesting, I thought. One had to do with this is a woman in China. Do we get it? Let me see. Well, I'm supposed to be getting better at doing this. I seem to be not getting better. This was a woman in China, and she's 50-some odd years old, and women in China don't get treated very well in general. And women in China, husbands tend to beat them up if they don't like them. They don't like the way they do things. Well, this woman was getting tired of being married. She didn't like the whole scene. She was officially retired, and she decided to leave and go on a solo trip all by herself around the country. So she got herself a Volkswagen. She outfitted it with a tent that she set up on the top of the thing, and she's by herself, traveling all over China in a car on a road trip. It was a refreshing story. What was interesting about it is she's making posts on her social network. So she's talking about her personal life. And in China, people don't talk about personal things too much. Well, by doing this, she has created quite a following of people who are interested in why she left her husband. She's not divorcing her husband. She's still married to him, and she'll return maybe at the end of the year or 2 years. And her daughter went and visited her. Her older daughter went and visited her in one of the towns where she was visiting. It's just an interesting human interest story about a woman in China who wanted to get away from home. She just wanted to basically get out of the house. Another interesting little story. Do we still have that one up there? Yeah, we'll get rid of that. And there's another interesting one about the mummies in Egypt. Well, there were all these mummies, and they were moving them from one museum to another museum. Let's see, where's the picture of the mummies? Here we are. Here's the mummies. Now, this is really interesting little story. 22 mummies stopped the traffic in Egypt. So they're moving the mummies in Cairo, in downtown Cairo. And they had this whole big fancy display where they set them up to move them. But the interesting thing is the fact that there's a huge wealth disparity in Egypt between the haves and the have-nots. And on this route we're taking it from one place to another, the caravan was going to pass through a bad neighborhood. And so what they did was they literally put up these huge boards and huge billboards and things to block the view, so none of the people that were in the poorer neighborhoods could even look at the parade. They told them, if you want to go see it, watch it on television. They didn't want to expose the parade route to the crumbling infrastructure on both sides of it, and they didn't want the people that were inside that crumbling infrastructure to be looking out at this. So they showed this on, I think it was on Meet the Press. They did a brief story about the moving of the mummies, but they didn't mention anything about how they kept the people from the ghettos, literally, from viewing this or from being viewed. A similar thing happened back in New York in the 70s, I believe, when they were they started to put paper fronts on some of the buildings that were deteriorating, that had broken windows in them. They would come and put these, they would cover the windows with sort of like wallpaper, essentially. They put like wallpaper up in the front of the buildings so the buildings didn't look so bad when the rich people from Manhattan would be driving from, say, the airport back to Manhattan. They would have to pass through the South Bronx. And God forbid they should see these deteriorating buildings. So they used to do a similar thing there in New York that they did in Cairo over this. So those were a couple of more interesting. The last, well, I keep saying it's the last one, maybe it's not the last one. The next to last one anyway is this fellow Republican, and I wish there were more of these guys around, and it's one Republican's lonely fight against a tidal wave of disinformation. And this is a guy, Denver Riggleman, and he's from Virginia, I believe. Yeah, Afton, Virginia. And he won an election back in 2016, and then he went against Trump when he realized what was going on with the election and how the misinformation was out there. And he's even been attacked by his family, by his friends. He just absolutely cannot get through to anybody. He said, I've been telling people, you don't understand. This is getting worse, not better. People are angry. And they're angry at the truth tellers. They're angry at the truth tellers. I ran into this just the other day when, well, I mentioned this anti-vaxxing group, and I ran into somebody, and we were both standing there watching the anti-vaxxers, and I made a comment to her about how they're crazy across the street. And she commented back to me like, oh no, I don't know what's going on. About how, well, she read it and she heard it on Fox News, and she read this in a paper, or she saw it on the internet, and you can't get through to some of these people no matter what you say. Fox News is just continuously spewing lies day in and day out, and at least they're being sued by a couple of these companies. That's probably the best thing that's going on right now. They're being sued by the two manufacturers of the voting machines. I talked about this at the last show. All right, so let's get that guy down. And the last story, the art section was sort of dull and boring, and the style section was fairly boring. The magazine had an interesting article in it, but for me, the big article for the week was the book review. And the book review had a story here called Prime Suspect. And the prime suspect is Amazon. Now, I've been talking about Whole Food and Amazon a number of times, and I'm going to give a little bit of a wrap about my involvement, my history with Whole Foods when they were first getting going in California. But the article here, it's a book review it's called Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One-Click America by Alec McGillis. And it's an investigation into the ways Amazon is changing America for the worse. And one of the early statements that's made here is how Amazon is one of the it's a company of parasitic opportunism. Parasitic opportunism. I couldn't agree more. And he says, Amazon, in the book here, McGillis gives us a picture of contemporary America as mere survival under precarity. Precarity meaning very precarious. So most Americans are living without any. They don't have a job stability like they used to have. A lot of people are working for. They're not in unions. They don't have benefits. They can get fired at will. Rents are going up. Medical costs are going up, and people have jobs that are temporary. It's a very precarious situation that they're in. Americans are merely surviving. And he attributes this to the egregious labor practices and political ruthlessness of Amazon. And he gives three reasons why this happened over a long period of time. That manufacturing has been moved overseas, organized labor has been in decline, and the eradication of the government safety nets. Well, the unions, well, all this started back in the 70s. The movement of manufacturing overseas is when what used to be called international companies then became multinational companies, and they started moving production overseas. At the same time they started doing this, the unions in America were approached by the international unions who wanted them to join forces together, because the international union could see what was going on. Well, the American unions were so up in the air, nose in the air, snobby about their situation, how strong they felt they were, that they wouldn't participate with the joining of the international European unions or the Asian unions. They said, no, we'll just handle it on our own. So we didn't. They cut them off, and they didn't want anything to do with these international unions. Well, by the time the 80s comes along and Reagan comes along, they knock the safety net right out, and they start to eviscerate the unions. So the moving of the manufacturing, the decline of the union of organized labor, and the eradication of the government safety nets are the three things that led to the situation we're at today, where Amazon temporarily retreated, only to strike a deal to impose a monthly fee on all ratepayers to make up the cost, while Amazon secretly secured a discounted rate for itself. They were involved with negotiations in a town, and the people in the town didn't want to give them a discount on their electric bill. So what they did was they backed off from having a direct confrontation, and they went around the corner to the electric company, and they made a deal with the electric company to get the discount. And the electric company then started charging the customers, the regular citizens, more money. So when Amazon couldn't get their way, they politically went around. They went around the bend. I think it was referred to the other night as going under the dome. If you can't get something done with the people in the street, then you go under the dome and you get the politicians who you bought to do it. Amazon. The story about pee bottles being used in warehouses, this is true. Amazon spent millions of dollars putting a diaper manufacturer out of business about 2 years ago. The small manufacturer was making these really good, high-quality diapers, and Jeff Bezos didn't have the diaper business. So what he did was he severely undercut this guy in order to put him out of business. He lost billions of dollars in order to get this guy out of business so that he could then have all the diaper business. This is one of the tactics that these guys use. I'm going to throw the picture over here for a second. This is John Mackey over there that I just swung the picture around to. And John Mackey is the guy who used to be the CFO or the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer for Whole Foods. He sold Whole Foods to Amazon a few years ago. When Whole Foods came to California in the 90s, Whole Foods had already had a reputation. If you go to their website and you read a little bit on their website about their history, it sort of sounds like they came from Austin, Texas. They didn't. They actually came from New Orleans, where the first store was. And they actually got kicked out of New Orleans because of Mackey's and his racist libertarian practices. He started off as sort of this progressive, and then along the way he starts reading Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand, and he becomes a hardcore libertarian. He's interested in health food, but he's more interested in business, and he figures out how to put it together, how to do it. So he starts as one small grocery store. What he starts doing is he starts paying his workers. He sets his pay scale halfway between what the low-end workers at the health food stores were making and what the low-end workers at the grocery stores that were in the union were making. And he set his sights right in the middle of there. So that's where he set his pay level, right in between the two. So the health food guy who wanted to make more money would be interested in working for Whole Foods, as opposed to the commercial guy who was already making more money. So it attracted a large number of people that had been in the health food business, and they started working for a few more dollars with Whole Foods, who then, they were making more money by putting more and more businesses out of businesses. I had direct contact at the time with people who were in the Sprout business. I think it was Weeby Green was the name of them. And Whole Foods started the account with them. And they started the account, and then they started increasing their purchases. And they were monitoring really carefully how much of the business they were doing with this one company. Well, it seemed like they had a plan in mind, and when they get over 50% of the business that's coming to them, so the company is now dependent on Whole Foods as their main distribution point, and they're selling them more than 50% of their product. Well, at that point, the company who's buying it has more power over these guys than they did in the beginning, and then they start to squeeze them to get the prices lower. Now that they're doing more business with them, they start to squeeze them. They squeeze them until the very end, when they either take over the company, buy it outright from them, or just put them out of business and start doing the product themselves. That's one of the tactics that they use, and they use it extensively. Amazon does the same exact thing, and that was that little story about the diapers that I just gave you. They do the same thing. Whole Foods, when Whole Foods came to Northern California, they wanted to move into Mill Valley. Now, there was a little health food store in Mill Valley that was the most successful per square foot health food store in America. It's called Living Foods, and this guy Jan Rubenstein was the owner. He had a general manager working for him for about a year or so named Walter Robb. Well, Walter Robb had more going on than met the eye, and Jan, on a number of occasions, wanted to move the business and expand it to this Quonset hut down the block. But every time he went to the council wanted him to put a water pipe in to make up for this new building they would be going into. So they wanted him to put a whole water pipe from way down there all the way down to the main control. And it was like just too expensive, so he turned it down a couple of years in a row. Well, Walter Robb is now working for him. Walter Robb now goes to the town council, takes the plans that Jan had used in the past, whites out Living Foods, and writes in Whole Foods. Now, this is the early 90s, and at this point, you know, nobody knows the difference between Whole Food, Living Food, Meshuggah Foods, or My Mother's Food. It was just one big blur, all these different companies. Walter Robb goes to the council knows him because he's been there with Jan in the past. They don't know the difference between Living Food and Whole Food. They tell him he needs to put in the water pipe. He says, well, put in the water pipe. It's passed. Boom. The next day, he goes to Jan. He tells Jan, I quit. So he quits working for Jan. Whole Food goes public. Walter makes $1 million in the deal. And Jan winds up going out of business in Mill Valley at about the same time. So I was there doing my deliveries for these health food products that I was delivering to all the stores in the Bay Area as this happened. And the opening of Whole Foods put my company out of business too. That's a whole story for another day. But the point was, the guy that's working for Jan is working for Mackey at the same time. So he's working for two bosses at the same time. He's got his foot in two different boats. He makes a deal to enrich this guy at the expense of this guy. This guy gets screwed. He quits. He makes $1 million. The company goes public. And here we have, and 10, 15 years later, Mackey sells Whole Foods to Amazon. And Jeff Bezos, who's making, what, $25,000 a minute, I think? An obscene amount of money. Continues the practices that Whole Food was was doing in order to keep their business going, crushing the competition. I think the word couldn't get any better. Parasitic opportunism. Parasitic opportunism. I've been wanting to talk about this whole food story for a little bit, and it fit in today because of the book review in the paper. Let's just leave it at there for the moment, and happy Easter, and peace, patience, persistence, and we'll see you as soon as we can.